There's a ton of different ways to figure out what size they're eating. One of the best ways to do it is to feed them and I'm Kyle, I'm here with Tye-Dyed Iguana. We're gonna be talking about the care it takes to have a ball python, one of these beautiful creatures right here. So stay tuned, and me and Mystic here are gonna tell you all about ball pythons. Cool, so let's get into some of the basics, which is pretty much what most people will ask is just how do you take care of a ball python? I'll be honest, it's one of the more simpler animals when it comes to care, especially when it comes to some reptiles. This snake's ball python specifically are pretty simple. So let's talk about how long they live first. So whenever you get a ball python, they're going to be with you for quite a while. I mean, you're looking 20 to 30 years, maybe even a little bit longer than that. They can live quite a while. But don't let that scare you off. They make a great pet. And I mean, that's a long time to have an awesome animal with you. Within those 20 to 30 years, they're going to obviously grow. When they're babies, they're only a couple inches, 6, 7 inches long, but they're gonna get up to about 5 to 6 foot long. They'll weigh anywhere between 4 to maybe 8 pounds at most. 8 would be a really, really big ball python, but they can get up to that weight. And with that size, obviously you're gonna need a pretty large tank when they get older. So we can go ahead and talk about tanks while we're at it. When they're babies, you can get away with something like a 20-gallon tank. That's totally fine for the first year or two. But once they're getting into that adult size, so they're getting 3, 4, 5, 6 foot long, you're gonna need something like a 40 breeder or a 36 by 18 by 16. Quite a larger size tank, but to be completely honest, going even larger than that is ideal. I'm talking about a 75 tank or bigger, 75 gallon tank or bigger. That's gonna be an ideal size tank for a fully grown ball python, just so they got enough room to really stretch out their bodies. Again, we're talking about a snake that's 5 to 6 foot long, which is pretty long. So what are you gonna need inside of these tanks? So between each tank, whether you got them as a baby or an adult, like I said, you're 20, you're 40, or you're 75, everything that you get inside of the tank is going to pretty much be the exact same, with the exception of the light wattage is going to change between each tank because the size changes. So let's talk about some of the simpler things that they're going to need. Every ball python is going to need substrate. Now there's a couple different options for substrate. For example, some of the options we have here, you can have aspen, which is an amazing option, or you can go with something like our advanced substrate, which is a natural type of soil that has like moss. You can even put in like some repti chip inside of that soil as well to kind of hold in humidity. So you could go with your aspen, your types of soil, or you can even do like the cocoa husk. That's a great option as well, also helps with humidity. We can even touch on the humidity while I'm talking about it. Ball pythons are gonna need a higher humidity, between 55 and like 65-ish range. So having something that can really hold in that humidity definitely helps with that. Now, what else are you gonna need besides substrate? Well, these guys love to hide. They are, honestly, 90% of the time, they're gonna be inside their little hides. I always recommend to have at least 2 hides inside of a tank, one on the warm side, one on the cool side, so they have options. And hides can vary from little simple plastic hides to ones that look like rocks outside to all sorts of cool things. But any type of hide will do. They're gonna definitely need at least 2 hides. Now with that, they're also going to need a water dish, of course, something that's large enough for the body of the snake to get into, because they will spend quite a good amount of time soaking in water, especially whenever they're about to shed. So make sure you got a quite large water bowl, and you wanna make sure you always keep that fresh, replace that water every day, keep it nice and clean for them. At the end of the day, this is a living creature, so we wanna make sure they have the best that they can have inside their environment. So lighting, now that's the thing that I said varies between tanks. When it comes to a ball python, they're going to need a temperature directly underneath that light, so their basking spot is what it's called. They're gonna need that at about 95 degrees. I'd say at max. If it's a little bit hotter, it's okay, but 95-degree max at that basking temp. So between each tank that we talked about earlier, it's going to be a different watt light. Now, again, depending on which tank you get, it's gonna vary on what watt light you get, but it's as simple as having your light fixture and your basking light just sitting directly on top or being held by a lamp stand. Again, you can have it sitting on top or held by a lamp stand. And you just want to make sure it's either on the right or left side of the tank. You don't want to put it in the middle. You want it on either side. That way they have a hot and a cold side. And again, directly underneath that, you're going to get a 95-degree basking spot. Now, how are we going to know that that temperature is correct? It's going to be, you get the right watt for whatever size tank you get. If you get a 20 gallon, you're going to need a 75 watt. If you get a 40 gallon, you're going to need a 100 watt. And anything bigger from there, your watts are just going to go up. And then not only having the proper light, but making sure you have some sort of thermostat in there, some sort of temperature gauge, anything to read that temperature. I always recommend to go digital when it comes to those things. They're the most accurate. Some of those analog ones could be a little off by a couple degrees, and sometimes having their temperature spot on could really mean the most when it comes to the longevity of their lifespan. So you want to make sure you have that basking spot at the right temp. Now let's talk about what these guys would eat. So unlike humans, where we eat every single day, or maybe, for example, some other animals that eat every day, ball pythons are only going to eat once a week. Once they're about full size, they're going to be eating once a week. As babies, feeding them maybe twice a week can be pretty beneficial, and we're talking only the first like 2 to 3 months of them being alive. After that, you're gonna go to once a week. So yeah, you're gonna feed them once a week, and it's gonna be based off the size of the snake. So you're gonna be feeding them either live or frozen, mice or rats, depending on the size of the snake. When I say live or frozen, it depends on your snake. Some snakes are pretty picky. I know ball pythons especially can be pretty picky with frozen, but if you get them on there, congratulations, that's awesome. But yeah, so you're gonna feed them once a week, and it's gonna be based off the thickest part of their body. So for example, this around here would be about the thickest part of the body, and you just base it off of that. You can also go by weighing them by grams, things like that. There's a ton of different ways to figure out what size they're eating. One of the best ways to do it is to feed them and time it. By the time they start swallowing the mouse or rat that you're feeding them, if it takes more than 10 minutes, we recommend to stay at that size. If it takes under 10 minutes, you need to go up a size. So that's kind of the best way to figure out what size they're gonna eat. Or you could just come in the Tye-Dye and we can just help you figure it out from there. Now, once they're full grown, I'm talking, you know, they're 4 or 5 years old, they're like 6 foot long. You can even feed them every other week if you choose to. But again, it really just comes down to what weight they are, you know, how much weight's on the body, things like that. All right, so let's talk about some of the day-to-day routine that you're gonna need to take care of a ball python now that we went through basically the entire setup and everything that you need for it to have a great life. So starting off, you're gonna wanna make sure you control that humidity. And depending on which substrate you go with, so for example, if you go with aspen, you want to make sure you control the humidity by probably having a larger water bowl of some sort, because you can't really spray that. It can create mold, things like that. You just want to be careful. So let's say you got any of the number of other substrates that I mentioned earlier. Those you can spray pretty much every day to every other day. You just kind of want to watch that humidity, make sure it stays between that 55, 65-ish range. If it's there, you don't really necessarily need to spray, but that's pretty much going to be one of the hardest things when it comes to day-to-day care, is really just making sure you keep that humidity up, make sure you do light sprays, things like that. And then of course, giving them fresh water every single day. They require that really, really nice fresh water. Just like us humans, we love fresh water. It's the same thing. So just make sure you're replacing that water bowl every single day, give it a good clean. And then another thing is spot cleaning. This one is very, very important. You wanna make sure you get the poop out. So they're gonna eat once a week. They're probably gonna poop once or twice a week. So you wanna make sure you really scoop that out, pay attention. Sometimes they'll poop inside their hides. Make sure you check in there every once in a while. I'm telling you, there's gonna be poop in there that you didn't see. Make sure you scoop that out just to keep the substrate clean, keep the snake clean, keep it smelling good. It just gets it out of the way. We don't want any nasty poop in there. I guess another thing we can add on like a daily care is just pay attention for whenever they're in shed. You'll notice their colors will get a little bit duller. If you have one that has a bit of a white belly, the belly will look a little pink. Whenever they're in shed, you just want to make sure you don't handle them too much. It could stress them out. And then once they shed, just make sure you take that shed out of there. And obviously when they're in the process of shedding, you want to make sure you keep that humidity like we talked about earlier. It definitely helps with that. And that's pretty much all of your day-to-day things when it comes to a ball python. I would say 90% of the time it's really just going to be them and their hides. But they make great animals. They make great pets. They are great animals. And at the end of the day, they just look beautiful. They're awesome.